Welcome to Boat Buyer's Secret Weapon. I am your host, Captain Matt, and today we are talking about engine killers, things people do to their boats that can cause catastrophic issues or issues down the line. So let's first talk about starting your engine on dry land. When you engage your engine, even if it's just for a couple of seconds to check if the battery is in good enough shape that you're going to crank up at the ramp, you have the impeller running in that housing dry, which is awful for that impeller. It's, if you've ever changed one yourself, you know how tight they fit. And if that impeller doesn't have any water to lubricate it, you're going to damage that engine, and especially if you let it run for any period of time. But never, ever, ever start your engine out of the water without earmuffs or some type of a water system that is cooling it and lubricating your impeller. Number two is idling at the dock for extended period of time. In today's boating environment, the last 15, maybe even 20 years, the technology is such that you don't have to warm your engine up like you had to in the past to really let that thing get going. Now, if you're running on a cold day, yeah, let it come up to temp. It may take a few minutes, but you don't need to let it run for 20, 30, 40 minutes. You're just putting extra time on the engine, and you're running it at idle, which is you want to get, when you're running your boat, you want to vary the RPM ranges that you're running at. Next, we have going into gear very, very slowly. I see this with a lot of first-time boaters, a lot of newer boaters that aren't comfortable with driving their boat. They go into gear really, really slow. And if you've got the digital throttle and shift, not as big a deal because the computer, when you get to the certain point, will just kick it in gear in a split second. If you've got a cable shift, you're getting those gears to a point where they're just, and they're instead of just chunking it in and let those gears grab each other. So when you go in and out of gear, go quickly into gear. Don't run past that kind of detent where you've got a buffer zone between being in gear and actually giving it throttle. We talk a lot about that. Best Boat Captain on the Water training program, where we go through and practice a maneuver so that you can get comfortable with that. Next, we have plowing through the water. Not only is this inconsiderate for other boaters by making a much bigger wake than is necessary, but it also is harder on the engine. If you're always plowing through the water, that is the hardest that engine has to work, is because it works so hard. Once it gets up on plane, that engine can kind of settle down a little bit. But if you're just plowing through the water, you're making that engine work much harder than what it needs to. Same thing can go for the use of trim, or the lack of use of trim, I might say. Trim is the angle of your lower unit or the engine. And by adjusting it, you can adjust the attitude of the bow of the boat. So if you're running with no trim, you're always going through the water, and those lifting strakes on your boat aren't kicking in. A pontoon, a fiberglass boat, it doesn't matter. When you use that trim, you allow that bow to come up. You pick up a little bit of speed because of the angle of the engine, and you allow those lifting strakes to and get you up on top of the water, so you're skimming across the water. And again, now your engine isn't working as hard. So getting good at setting your trim and knowing where that should be is going to make your boat engine not have to work as hard. And again, we talk about this in the Best Boat Captain on the Water training of how to set your trim, because it's not a set it and forget it type of situation. It's not always this is the setting. It is depending on the conditions, depending on the weight in your boat, depending on your speed. All of that matters, even how much fuel you have in the boat. All of that matters, and it needs to be a feel. You need to understand what the trim does, and you can then get the most performance out of your boat, but also make sure that your boat's not under undue stress, the engine. The same thing goes with running at kind of I call it an optimal speed. So when you're running your boat, getting it trimmed up, getting your throttle setting just right, almost every boat has a sweet spot for their speeds. And what I mean by that is a spot where the engine is just humming and it just sounds like it's comfortable and it's enjoying the ride as much as you are. It's not working real hard. It's not overworking, but it's that sweet spot. And it's a combination of getting the trim set and the throttle set at the right settings. And every boat's a little bit different, but it's not just running 25 miles an hour. It's running at that, whatever the sweet spot is for your boat. Now, by no means am I saying blow through a sign like this that has a minimum speed, but I'm saying in normal usage, for the most part, try to run your boat in a comfortable speed for the life of the engine is going to be extended. Also, make sure it's safe for the conditions that you're operating in. Next, we have breaking the surface of the water with your propeller. One of the worst things that you can do for your boat is to hit that big chop and send it flying and let that propeller just freewheel. Imagine the resistance that the water gives. As soon as it breaks the surface of the water, now that 6,000 RPM or that 5,000 RPM that you were running is now who knows how much. It's awful for your engine. It goes over the rev limiter because resistance, no resistance, and boom, it's spinning out of control and putting excess undue pressure on the entire system. So avoid that. It's why when you see offshore racers, they've got a pilot and a co-pilot. One's driving, one's running the throttle. So if they do break the surface, boom, they come out of throttle and they come back. When they hit back, they come back in, and that's their sole purpose. So it is bad news for your engine, for your drive. Running a boat with low oil, low gear lube, not checking it on a continuous basis. One of the worst things that you can do for a mechanical thing is to let it run with too much or not enough lubrication. So always make sure you're checking your engine oil, your gear lube, and your power steering fluid, as well as your trim ram fluid. Check all of those. Every boat may not have all of those, but check the ones that are on your boat so you're running at the proper levels and with clean fluids as well, changing them as necessary. And then not having a good impeller that's got good water pickup. You can see the one on the right. It's bad. It's misshapen a little bit. It's not disintegrating. It's not falling apart. But because those fins are curved, it's not getting the water pickup that you'll find with a newer impeller. It's why the recommendation typically is every 2 to 3 years, depending on your manufacturer, but that's a common one because the more water you're picking up, the cooler that engine is running, the cooler it's running, the less wear and tear on those engines. So those are the engine killers. Avoid them at all costs. Subscribe to the channel. If you're looking at buying a boat, check out the Boat Buyer's Toolkit. It's totally free, boatbuyerssecretweapon.com/toolkit. Leave a comment, any engine killers that I missed. And remember, life truly is better on a boat.